what happened, and our hearts and prayers go out to the people in Philadelphia. Thanks so much, everybody. Ashleigh Banfield, up next. Hair in the back.
Hi, everybody. It's a Friday night, and just 2 days after bringing you the first major air disaster since 2009, another air disaster to bring you tonight. Very different dynamic. A private medevac has crashed with multiple people on board, said to be, and very sad to report this, that on board were a physician and a patient, possibly a pediatric patient, as well as patient escort and 4 crew members. We are unaware of fatalities on the ground at this point, but you are looking at pictures of what people in Philadelphia saw just after 6 o'clock. That fireball is simply unbelievable. You can see the traffic coming to a dead stop with that fireball exploding in front of them, and you can see that Learjet hitting the ground. And you can also see the steep descent of that Learjet 55. That crashed in a busy commercial area at the Roosevelt Mall in Philadelphia. It was 3 miles from the Northeast Philly airport. And it was headed to Springfield, Missouri. Again, this was a private medevac, presumably taking that pediatric patient to care in Missouri. The weather, not great. But you can see this, this ring cam gives you another perspective of the size of that fireball. Don't know if this is weather related. Not sure we could say that given that the steep descent of that aircraft. But we can tell you this, that one of the television stations in Philadelphia, KYW, had grounded its chopper because the weather was not good in Philadelphia tonight. So that may have some bearing. The governor, Josh Shapiro, is on location with the mayor, Sherrill Parker, in this area. They're giving semi-frequent updates, if you can call it that. This man leaving his home and his ring cam catching the moment of the jet falling and exploding. It's just sort of a remarkable image to be able to see. And also, as you can see how far away it is, look at the impact it has on this man and the woman in the doorway. They are terrified, and the sound and the combustion, maybe even the feel of it, the concussive feel of it, sent them running right back into their home. There's very little I can tell you about casualties, but I can tell you what some witnesses have said, as well as one of the city councilors in that area, that there are multiple buildings that were on fire and at least one building or home completely destroyed, according to that city official speaking on NewsNation earlier. What's awful to consider is that even a small Learjet, not that small, given the fact that there were apparently a number of people on board, according to the actual company, it said that there was a pediatric patient, a patient escort, and 4 crew members, so 6 people on board likely. That carries 7,000 pounds of fuel, and they were taking off, so it presumably was fully loaded with fuel. Also, this video coming into us not long ago, a street eye view. I'm thinking this is not long after the crash. It is frenetic. I want to ask our control room if we can bring up the sound. Do we have the sound on that video? Because you can hear the panic. We don't have it yet. We're working on getting the sound for that video because you can really hear the panic in people's voices. But there is a nail salon right on that area. You can see it, Van's Nail Salon, and that is located right at that crash area. A lot of people frantic as this, you can see the debris everywhere. And clearly this is debris that's very dangerous. It could be scorching hot, extraordinarily sharp. Look at that person running from that scene. These images coming out of Philadelphia, just sort of like mind-numbing, especially again on the heels of what happened over the Potomac River and Reagan National Airport just 2 nights ago. We are continuing to follow that story, but this is in our immediate radar right now because we don't know yet how many people were hit on the ground, or if any were. But there are reports that cars were hit. Whether that means those cars yielded casualties on the ground, can't tell you that yet. The other thing that's really remarkable in the videos that we've been watching is how fast that jet descended, and that it appeared to be on fire as it was descending, as opposed to blowing up upon impact. Now, clearly there was a larger fireball upon impact, but you can see the light as it's descending. It's pretty stark. Here's the FAA statement. I think the time is slightly off because this happened just after 6 o'clock, but this is what the FAA said. A Learjet 55 crashed around 6:30 p.m. local time after departing from Northeast Philadelphia Airport. There were 2 people on board. That seems to be outdated as well. And it was en route to Springfield Branson National Airport. NTSB and FAA will be investigating. The statement from the Jet Rescue, the air ambulance company, says that the patient on board was pediatric. Let me read it for you because it seems more informative. Today at approximately, and again, the time seems to be wrong, 19:25, which is 7:25, Jet Rescue Air Ambulance experienced a crash. The aircraft XA-UCI Learjet 55 crashed after takeoff from Philadelphia. There were 4 crew members and 1, and then in parentheses, 2 passengers, pediatric patient and escort on board. No further information available at this time. We cannot confirm any survivors. No names are being released at this time until family members have been notified. Our immediate concern is for the patient's family, our personnel, their families, and other victims that may have been hurt on the ground. More information to be released as it becomes available. The mayor stating emphatically to any residents to please stay away from the scene and do not touch any of the debris. It is all an investigative scene and also extremely dangerous. She encourages anyone to call 911. Witnesses say pieces of debris look to be hitting the tops of cars as that explosion happened. I want to bring in, and I think is Edward Kelly on the phone? Is he able to talk to me or is he available? Mr. Kelly, can you hear me? Edward Kelly is the general president of the International Association of Firefighters. He was an Air Force firefighter previously. Jet fuel fires and other serious issues on the ground, I think might just be, Mr. Kelly, the immediate concern. Can you tell me your expertise as you see the scene unfolding?
Sure. Well, when you have a jet crash like this in a neighborhood, it's obviously going to have massive impact on the neighborhood. We were actually somewhat lucky here that jet actually crashed in the middle of a decent-sized thoroughfare. Had that hit the row housing on just off to the side of it, fire did spread into that row housing, but had it hit that row housing directly, we could have lost city blocks tonight. As it was, the Philadelphia Fire Department struck 3 alarms for that, bringing in roughly 150 firefighters. They're an aggressive fire department. That led to the saving of that block of homes that you see there. Also, there were people trapped, and the Philadelphia firefighters effected rescues tonight that saved lives. There were multiple buildings involved. One firefighter we know was injured on the scene so far. There's still a lot of work to be done. We'll have to do primary searches and secondary searches all throughout that neighborhood. So there's still a lot of work to be done there.
Can you just tell me where this information comes from, that people were trapped and needed to be rescued and that a firefighter was injured?
We've been in contact with the firefighters on the ground in Philadelphia that were working the scene.
Did they say anything about injuries or fatalities on the ground? Because there were early reports that there were bodies in the street, unconfirmed, of course. But did any of your firefighting contacts on the scene confirm any of that?
No, I can't confirm any of that.
Nor injuries on the ground?
The only injury I can confirm is one Philadelphia firefighter.
The firefighter and is that a serious injury? Is that are they being treated?
No,
are they in hospital?
We think he's going to be okay. We think he's going to be okay.
Okay.
He was taken to the hospital.
Also, I'm just looking at this scatter pattern of fire. Mr. Kelly, this just looks almost immeasurable. I don't see any, it's so early, I don't even see fire crews being able to attend to the image that's directly on the screen. Tell me how you attack a crash site so large and vast, given that there are dangers for the firefighters.
Right. Well, jet fuel in particular is a very aggressive accelerant. So we had, and we've seen this before, we have had plane crashes into neighborhoods multiple occasions, one in Boston in the mid-'80s that look very similar to that. You have cars that will be on fire, multiple buildings, fire spreading. That jet fuel as I said, is very dangerous. We do use firefighting foams. Most fire departments in major cities have foam capacity on certain engine companies that will then respond to anything related to jet fuel fires. I think we saw that tonight. They had an aggressive attack. The first priority is always going to be life safety, searching those buildings that were involved and making as many rescues as you can, coupled with the fact that you have to get water and foam, if you have foam capabilities, on the fire as soon as possible, trying to knock it down. And like I said, tonight, Philadelphia, which is known as a very aggressive fire department, did a particularly excellent job knocking that fire down, saving the rest of that city block, as well as affecting rescues. Unfortunately, people are still lost tonight, so God bless them, and our prayers are with them.
God bless their families, especially that pediatric patient. My heart just goes out to everyone who is affected by that. Mr. Kelly, I'm still so curious about being able to extinguish those fires with typical tankers and water. Do they spray water on jet fuel, or must they mobilize those foam assets in order to neutralize those fires?
Well, they still will put water on the flaming materials. Like, for instance, those buildings that are burning, the cars that are burning, you can still hit that with water and effectively extinguish the fire. The fuel, the jet fuel itself, using the foam capacity to coat it is the method of extinguishment for those jet fuel fires.
Mr. Kelly, if you could stand by for just a moment, I want to bring in Captain Armin Kurdian. Captain Kurdian, you and I just spoke 2 nights ago about the air disaster over the Potomac, and I'm glad to have you back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Well, thank you so much for this. I'm going to ask for your early guidance on what might be surmised, knowing fully that this is so early, we cannot possibly know what caused this Learjet 55 to descend to the ground so rapidly and so steeply. But can you, and I'm going to ask our control room to show some of those images of the jet descending, because it really is telling how quickly, there was no glide, Captain, and I wonder what you can tell me about that.
Right. My eyes are kind of flickering back and forth and looking at the video down there. It's just awful that we're back here talking about this again after just a couple of days. Something to consider is that aircraft want to fly. They want to stay airborne. Even an airplane with both of its engines not operating can still glide if it's under control. The fact that this aircraft came into a dive just a few seconds after takeoff tells me a couple of things. Number one, it had no power. And number two, something catastrophic happened that's so bad that it possibly, we don't know, maybe part of the wing blew off. Perhaps the flight controls froze because there was no hydraulics and the airplane went into a spin. You could see the flames shooting out of the engine. Actually, the first thing that struck me that considered, which might be causing this accident, would be a possible dual bird ingestion. Did it fly into a flock of seagulls that blew up the engines and then caused this accident to happen? So it could be a myriad of issues. It could be, it was discussed, maybe something exploded on board an oxygen tank, or it could be completely unrelated and just horrible, terrible circumstance, accident, unforeseeable, where something just blew up in the engine, which is exceptionally rare, but it does happen.
Can I ask you a little bit about Learjets? Because another person I heard with expertise said that they are notoriously difficult to fly, that they were originally built as fighter jets, now used in the private sector, and of course this is a medevac, but that they are difficult to fly. Tell me more about that.
I wouldn't necessarily characterize them as difficult to fly. Generally, some of the most difficult aircraft to fly could be, a twin turboprop aircraft, single pilot. That's rather challenging for one person to do. Business jets, aircraft like this with turbofan engines, they can be relatively forgiving. It's all a question of, the handling qualities, how the cockpit is laid out. That can actually make an aircraft much more challenging to fly when, say, a cockpit layout is not very conducive. Nowadays, you've got glass cockpits, a lot fewer, let's call them steam gauges, the old types of dials, now it's all electronic display that are on there. So I don't know that I necessarily characterize the Learjet as a difficult aircraft to fly. Every aircraft is designed with emergencies in mind, to be able to fly with a single engine, to be able to recover under control, even with an engine fire, emergency systems, backups for the flight controls and for the landing gear, because obviously you want to prevent something catastrophic like this from happening. When something explodes and something is physically damaged and breaks off the airplane, then of course all bets are off. But we'll have to see what actually happened here.
The other difference in a Medivac Learjet and just a commercial or a private Learjet might be that they have oxygen containers often on board. Is there anything to the oxygen canisters that you can think of that might be significant seeing the images we're seeing?
Well, hypothetically, if the tanks were on board and not stored properly, say something came loose, say the aircraft hit an air pocket and something came out, or perhaps there was some other kind of spark or ignition and perhaps a seal came out, or as the aircraft was climbing, perhaps the air tank wasn't properly designed and it couldn't take the pressure and it blew up, even though 1,600 feet doesn't seem like a lot. There is a change in altitude pressure right there. This is purely hypothetical, of course. However, when you're coming down like that, this kind of an impact, the aircraft is going to explode. You saw the jet fuel go everywhere. If an air tank exploded in flight, if that actually happened, we have no evidence to tell us one way or the other. That could have caused a catastrophic decompression of the airframe. It could have caused a major fire. The pilot may not have had a chance to actually recover at that point and at such a low altitude, and then possibly come down.
The other question I have for you is that I saw some video earlier on the ground, and it looked like the debris was in bits and pieces. I couldn't see any large piece of fuselage, and I just wondered if you can lend some expertise in terms of trying to determine what happened here based on that. I mean, the images there show nothing recognizable. I know the FAA and the NTSB, I know that they can put everything back together again, but when you see that, how hard will it be to determine exactly what happened on that plane?
So we've seen air disasters or air crashes where an aircraft came down from a high altitude, where you found parts of an aircraft, say, miles away from where, say, the center of mass might have been when it actually came down. An engine, part of the flight controls, part of the landing gear, or part of the fuselage skin. We've seen fuselages explode just simply due to poor design or poor maintenance, where a piece of the skin just comes off and flies off. That's all entirely possible. Looking at that video and that explosion, when you're coming straight down like that and you're fully fueled, that is a massive, massive explosion. It's going to blow that aircraft apart. There is no amount of structural integrity that's going to keep it together. So it is going to be an exceptionally challenging task to put it together. I don't even know if the black box, which is designed to survive impact and fire, could have even survived an impact like this. I'm sure they're looking for it. If they find it, we might have a really good idea of what actually happened. If we don't, then it is going to be an exceptionally challenging job. But I can tell you that the folks at the NTSB are the best in the profession. They go all over the world to help with air disasters. So if anybody can figure out what happened or come up to a good theory as to the cause, perhaps we'll find additional video that might lend itself to additional information, as well as the air traffic control tapes. The NTSB is going to be the one to do it.
The other question I have for you is that, look, it's hard to know whether witnesses will be able to lend much to the investigation. I think they'll be able to lend the layperson's account. There are witnesses who say there were people screaming, crying, bleeding. I suppose that is not unusual when you have something like this. But how much will witnesses, just like me, who know so little, be able to lend to what happened here?
It's going to be very, very difficult. I think, as we've seen, some of the best information we're going to have is going to be dash cams from vehicles. When, at night, you may not even be able to see it, but you could probably hear something coming down. You never know. Witnesses may be able to tell us something, or more likely, if, like I said before, any parts of the aircraft came and fell other places, the witnesses need to tell the NTSB, need to tell authorities, don't touch it, don't disturb it, because not only could it be toxic or dangerous, but at the same time, they're going to want to get a photograph and forensically look at where it is and how it landed, especially if it's a larger piece. So, you don't want to disturb it. Every last bit of information is going to be part of the solution right here. Now, if a a witness might say, hey, I heard something in the air, and then later I saw the aircraft come down. Then perhaps if a witness heard some kind of muffled explosion or some kind of thud or thump, it could have been an explosion of the aircraft in flight. That could be very, very useful. And of course, where that individual is in relation to the course and speed of the aircraft. If you had several people who say, I heard this thump, and then you might be able to triangulate the estimated position when something might have happened, because ATC, the radar, is very, very inaccurate, but even it wouldn't be able to know what that kind of thing is. So it's almost a question of the ears of witnesses vice their eyes, which might lend some clues.
Captain Armin Kurdian, I can't thank you enough. Again, it's so odd that we called on you twice in 1 week, 2 days apart, for a major air disaster. We have so little information on the casualties on the ground, but as we learn more, we will update our audience. Thank you, Captain, for your help tonight.
Sure, God be with their families.
God be with their families indeed, and those all around this neighborhood whose lives will be forever changed with this disaster. We are going to divert from this for a moment, and when there is news to bring you, I certainly will do so. But I do have something else that's really important to bring you tonight, and it is a remarkable conversation with someone most people don't even want to think about. He is Steven Nelson, and he's on death row in Texas, and he's due to receive a lethal injection on Wednesday. You may be fiercely opposed to the death penalty, or you may cheer his date with destiny for what he did to a young pastor 12 years ago. Either way, I will bet that you're wondering what he said in his very last interview on Earth. We have it. You'll hear it next. Welcome back. It is hard to feel sorry for Steven Nelson. I mean, there are murderers, and there are murderers, and he is in that last category. What he did to a young pastor 14 years ago is beyond comprehension. He struck that pastor, Pastor Clinton Dobson, in the head, and he wrapped an extension cord around his neck, pulling tightly, and then he put a plastic bag over Pastor Dobson's head until the struggling stopped. It was brutal, but it wasn't over. The 69-year-old church secretary was next. She was beaten so badly that she should have died, but instead she suffered brain and traumatic injuries, and she remained a witness. The evidence against Steven Nelson was overwhelming. The victim's blood was on Nelson's shoes. Nelson's fingerprints were at the crime scene. He also had the victim's belongings, including the secretary's car. So it didn't take the jury long, just 90 minutes to sentence him to death. For what it's worth, Steven Nelson says he was only a lookout for what was supposed to be a robbery, and that his two accomplices were behind the lethal handiwork that happened inside. Those accomplices were never prosecuted, even though one of them was found with stolen items. No matter, because the law sees a lookout no different than a killer. So barring anything short of a miracle, Steven Nelson's lethal injection is scheduled for Wednesday, February the 5th. His appeals are done, and he has agreed to give us his last interview on Earth. Here is how he described the crime, and it should be noted, he never once took responsibility.
I did not see who let him in when they knocked on the door, because I was paying attention to the people across the street. So they're in there, maybe, I would say, 20 minutes go by, and I'm thinking in my head, this is taking too long, you know? So I walked toward the door, it was locked. So I knocked, and his friends came to the door. I said, what's up? What's happening? He said, come on back. So he led me to the back to an office. And as I walked to the office, to the doorway, the door, like he went in a little bit, but the door was kind of closed a little bit. So with my hand, I just opened the door a little bit more so I could see before I stepped in. And there were two people on the right-hand side of the office were laying face down. They were tied up, and their legs was tied up. So I asked them, why are you doing this so extreme? Because the night before, nothing like that ever happened, you know? And so they said, well, they were struggling. I said, man, look, y'all was supposed to, get valuables and leave. So I seen the laptop to my left on the desk. So they wasn't doing anything but standing around by the people. They were moving. The people were moving. So I walked over there, I grabbed the laptop, and I was looking for the satchel to put it in. So I looked and I seen underneath the desk, so I walked to the front desk and I put a knee down and my foot stretched out a little bit, and I grabbed the satchel and I put the laptop in. Before I left the office, I said, look, y'all doing too much. Y'all need to come on, we need to leave. And at that time, it was like, I'm scared because these people are hurt, and I really can't do nothing during that time because I had no weapon on me. One of my co-defendants had a gun. So if I would have called the police or 911, I would have been dead. So it's kind of like a win-lose, right, situation. So I was telling them, hey, this come on. So only thing I had on me was the laptop. So I walked outside, I went back to where I was, facing the road to where they were doing home improvement, just in case they was looking this way, being suspicious, or calling the police. So another 15, 20 minutes go by again, and now I'm like overwhelmed. So I go back in, knock on the door, they open the door for me, go in there, and when I go in there, the people that were right here on the right were were on the side of the desk now. So I was like, what are y'all doing? This is not supposed to be it. This is not what's supposed to be done. And one of my co-defendants said that there was the man, the pastor, was still trying to get loose and stuff like that. I didn't ask questions, did anything else happen after that? I said, man, we need to go.
Sounds like a victim himself. Stephen Nelson blames his conviction on his lawyers. Says he got bad advice and that the system was stacked against him from the beginning. He also adds that important evidence was ignored in his case.
Because my lawyers at that time, Bill Ray, Steve Gordon, told me not to testify. Because during that trial, they only did surface stuff. They didn't investigate my other two co-defendants. They didn't investigate anything. So to me, I'm like, man, I should tell my own story. I should tell what happened play by play. So that's what I did. And right before trial, I asked the DA, can I take a lie detector test? He told me no. He said I was an easy conviction. I want to say that all the evidence, the new evidence, and the evidence that my trial lawyers in that time didn't present, it shows that I did not kill anybody. It also shows how the judicial system is made for you to lose at all costs, no matter what. And that shouldn't be right. And, like doctors, state doctors, stuff like that, she said that I was automatically a future danger because I'm a minority, because I'm black. And that's unfair to judge somebody by the color of their skin. I'm automatically guilty. And that shouldn't be that.
Stephen Nelson says he tried to reach out to the pastor's family through the church, but says they asked the Department of Corrections in Texas to block him. When asked about what he would say to the church secretary who survived the 69-year-old woman, here's how he answered. I
will tell her that I would like to apologize, for the my actions in the role that I played, even though I wasn't the person who assaulted her. And it still hurts to this day that I couldn't do nothing at the time, you know? And I keep thinking, like, what if that was one of my family members, you know? And I wrote a letter to them, but the church denied the letter. And because that really hurt me, you know? Because your organization of Christ, you know, and it's always redemption and a second chance. I just want to say that this will be my last interview, because I have my execution day is next Wednesday, and that people do deserve second chances. You know, I'm not a lost cause. I'm not beyond help. I'm not broken. My foundation might have been cracked 13 years ago, but my foundation is whole now. And I'm not the monster they say that I am, which I'm not.
Steven Nelson does admit that he deserves to be locked up for his role in the crimes, but there is something else that you should know about Steven Nelson. During the last 13 years in prison, he says he's been working on himself, that he's done a, quote, 360 from where he was, and that his case deserves another chance. This despite the fact that while he was locked up, he was also accused of another murder. So there's that. If anybody ever had the right to lose hope in police and in the system and in humanity itself, it's John Ramsey. Ramsey's 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, is the very face of unsolved mysteries, and for that matter, of botched investigations as well. So why is her long-suffering father now hopeful that after 28 years, part of which police wrongfully put him under suspicion, that JonBenét's murderer might finally be named and brought to justice? John Ramsey joins me live next. Whenever something brings me back to the JonBenét Ramsey case, I can't help thinking about how old she'd be now. I will spare you the math, but this year, the little girl who was killed in her own home at age 6 would turn 35. I know. JonBenét's murder would have had a place in true crime history just for how and when and where it happened. Instead, it's become a case study in how not to catch a murderer. To be fair, there have been some moments that gave JonBenét's family hope for a breakthrough, and tonight there may be another one. This week, JonBenét's father, John Ramsey, traveled from his home in Utah to Boulder, Colorado, where his young family used to live and where JonBenét died. It was a difficult trip, but an important mission. John met with Boulder's new chief of police, who he believes has a better than ever chance of finding JonBenét's killer using the same DNA-based methods that have now solved a number of other high-profile murders. John Ramsey is kind enough to join me back on the program. Gosh, John, this is sort of like what I've been waiting to hear from you. We have talked a lot about genetic genealogy. Just seems like a natural, and I never expected the Boulder police to have a meeting with you. This has been almost 30 years and that hasn't happened. Tell me about it.
Well, you're right. We've been very frustrated with the leadership in the Boulder Police Department for 28 years. It's been bad, in my judgment, and poor leaders don't build strong, effective organizations, and that was the problem we had. Boulder did bring in a new police chief from the outside, dealt with some problem detectives, one of which was on our case for years. And it's kind of a fresh start. And we had a meeting, and my objective of the meeting was to make sure that they understood the potential value of the latest DNA technology and genealogy research that can be done and has been done to solve some very old cold cases. And I think that's how our case will be solved. So that was my objective of the meeting. And it was a good meeting. I was impressed with the leadership now in the police department, which had to be step one. Without that change, we would still be at square zero. But the leadership I was impressed with. They seem sincere. They want to solve this case, very committed to it. And we had a good discussion on the DNA technology that I think will solve the case, has a good chance of solving the case. So I'm encouraged. Now it's time to give them some time to see what happens.
I keep thinking about Othram Labs in Texas, and I know they're not the only game in town for genetic genealogy, for taking like really, compromised pieces of DNA that are either too small or damaged and really making a model out of them so that they can go into databases and find family members of a potential killer. Did they indicate to you, and I understand if you can't share, and I also understand if they didn't share with you because good detectives and police officers don't, but did they give you any hope that they're doing that they're going to these kinds of incredibly advanced, companies that deal in this kind of science and employing them to help?
Yes. Reading between the lines, I think they are looking at that hard. And we did have a DNA expert with us to make sure we had good information to present. And he was very effective in just talking about what can be done. So whether the police knew that already or not, but at least it got out on the table, we discussed it. And I said, look, I think this is how we'll solve the case. I think it's our best shot. It's the most likely way the case can be solved. We get leads, but we've been getting leads for 28 years. And, they're well meeting leads, but they haven't produced a result. And that's a very, very primitive way to try to solve a murder, in my opinion. This is the latest and the greatest, and I'm just convinced it'll work.
I am crossing both fingers and both toes below the anchor desk for you and for the Boulder Police, and I'm so heartened to hear that you feel good about them, because we have never heard that before from you and your family, understandably. So God bless, and let's stay in touch, okay?
All right, very good. Thank you.
Okay, John Ramsey joining us again. I feel it in my bones. I feel it in my bones. There's going to be good news, and it's going to be a good interview the next time we meet. Coming up next, I am not one to cover politics, not national, not local. This is a true crime show. But I could not resist the story I came across in Illinois because something about it looks criminal to me. It's a township meeting for the record books. Take a look. Somewhere in that mess was the leader of that community herself. I'm going to sort out these players and tell you what on earth led to this intense moment of pride. Next. You're not going to be able to take your eyes off this next story, but there are two ways to look at it. You could see dozens of civic-minded citizens attending a town hall meeting on a weeknight. And you could think, despite everything, the spirit of America still lives on in the heartland. Or you could look at the same pictures and you could think the cynics are right. Politics is now a blood sport. I take you to the meeting of Thornton Township Board of Trustees near Chicago. At issue were the lapsed insurance policies that forced many of the township's services, including buses, to shut down for weeks. But the real issue seemed to be a woman named Tiffany Henyard, the township supervisor, who's not exactly a stranger to controversy. Here's what some of her constituents had to say about Tiffany.
Tiffany, you are taking losses in both the village and the township. And the nightmare is over.
Are you always trying to call somebody else out? We're calling you out.
Hey, hey, whoa, Tiffany has to go.
And then it got a heck of a lot uglier. A community activist and known critic took issue with Tiffany Henyard's sex life and her parenting. Take a look.
All those against it say nay. All those in favor say aye. You go.
That's when things got violent. Henyard's boyfriend was there because he's also on the township payroll, and he led the charge. Say what you will about town supervisor Tiffany Henyard, but the girl fights her own battles because here she is jumping right into the fray.
Hey, Mo. Ain't she had? She took both of them down. Look, she took both of them down. And did critical. Oh, and you
Police showed up, but no one was arrested, and Henyard should enjoy that feeling while it lasts. Because just one day before the dust-up, investigators found that Tiffany Henyard apparently mishandled almost $1 million belonging to the village of Dolton, where she also serves as mayor. A 73-page report cites, and I quote, a concerned, systematic effort to cover up the village's, quote, true financial condition. So I guess Tiffany's going to have to keep on fighting, so to speak. Okay, I have a quick update for you when we come back after the break. I found out a few more things about that crash in Philly, so I'll have that for you in just a moment. Come right back. I want to get you some updated information on the Philadelphia plane crash. Fox 29 in Philadelphia is reporting that the child that was on board was a pediatric patient who'd just been treated in Philadelphia for a life-threatening condition and was on her way home to Mexico when the medical transport jet crashed. That is from Jet Rescue Air Ambulance. The spokesperson told the Associated Press. There are 60,000 people, by the way, that live within a 1-mile radius of this fireball and this crash. So you can imagine a lot of people could have been affected by this. That jet was a 43-year-old jet. It was scheduled to go to Tijuana after the Springfield, Missouri drop. Also, it is said